Hello and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. Today we're at the Salt Lake City FanX with special guest Kathleen Dalton-Woodbury. Hello, Kathleen.
Hello.
So you were winner back in Volume 9, which was...
Was in 1993.
Wow. So...
Actually, I was a finalist, like
Okay.
Brandon Sanderson. And I was one of the finalists that was selected to
And
fill out the
published.
volume. So the winners are all published in the books, but there are a few finalists who get to be in as well. And I was one of those lucky people.
Well, then lucky you indeed.
Yes.
And she's with us here today at the FanX, and it's great. I've actually haven't had a chance really to meet you before, so this is great. We've been on Facebook. Sometimes I think you've commented, or I've seen you on Facebook, but this is the first time face to face. So this is great being able to meet you.
Well, it's great to meet you too.
So now you work a lot with Orson Scott Card on one of his programs. Can you talk about that, please?
Well, he asked me to moderate a forum for writers that he was creating on his Hat Rack website. And he asked me that because I had been publishing a newsletter for writers, a monthly newsletter every year. And so this was a different venue.
Yeah.
And I had participated as a moderator on a very, very old, in fact, it was killed by Y2K. It was called Genie. General Electric had set it up, and then they didn't want to keep it going when year 2000 came.
Yeah.
And so it died. But it was a great place for science fiction fans and writers and readers to talk to each other. And I was a moderator on that, so I had experience doing moderating, but I also had writing experience.
Yeah.
And I encourage writers, I comment on things that they're working on. It's so great to see them get the idea, and the main purpose is to just learn how to give feedback.
Right.
Because you actually learn more about writing if you're trying to help somebody else. It really is better to give than to receive.
Wow, it's actually something that bears out quite frequently in science fiction. I know Orson Scott Card definitely has that mantra that he lives by.
Yes.
So how did you originally learn about Writers of the Future?
I knew Dave Wolverton. I was involved with a writers group that he joined. And Orson Scott Card came to a local convention and did a workshop, and I attended it. And the people that were in that workshop decided they really liked this kind of process.
Right.
So they kept going. And I knew him from that. I also knew Shane Bell, who won the same year he did. And we just... when Dave won, it was really kind of exciting for everybody. And he encourages the rest of us to start sending stories in. And so that's how I learned about it. Word of mouth is a great way to get the word out.
So with your years involved with working with the forum and just, over the years with science fiction, how have you seen it's been evolving? How have you seen the evolution?
Well, the Hat Rack River Writers Workshop Forum isn't as busy as it once was, because some people, new people, think, well, I can just publish my story, and they miss the opportunity to learn from others. You come and you participate in a workshop of some kind, and you get the idea of how your work is received, if someone understands it, if it makes sense. Orson Scott Card has 3 questions that he says you have to answer for your readers. And he calls them faith, hope, and clarity. And faith is, oh yeah? And hope is, so what? And clarity is, huh? And if you can't make it clear and meaningful and believable to your readers, you've lost them. And so this is one of the things that when somebody presents their story for feedback, that people can tell them. In fact, Orson Scott Card again, says that if you want to find out how, but you don't want to join a workshop or anything like that, find somebody who likes to read and have them tell you every time their eyes glaze over when they're reading and every time it doesn't make sense, and just mark it on the manuscript. And that will tell you amazing things about, you just know where you need to work. So having feedback from other people who are trying to do the same thing you're doing is very useful, and it helps you with your project. But when you do it for somebody else, you're learning things that can help you with all of your projects. So that's why it's better to give than receive, because you learn how to look at it and how to figure out what needs to be done.
So that's something, if somebody went to the forum on Hat Rack, they'd get that right now.
Hatrack.com. There's a bar at the top that has several different links, and Writer's Workshop is one of them. And it will take you to a page that tells you about it, and then there's a link to entering it, and you can read what people have said to other people on their stories. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to register. But if you want to participate, you do. And so it goes back. I mean, Eric James Stone was a participant, Mary Robinette Kowal. There are a lot of great people, and you can look back and see what their stories look like and what they said and what other people said to them and things that they learned. And it's a great resource even if you don't participate.
I get it. So now on the Hat Rack, it's hatrack.com, right?
Yes.
Are there other tools that are available for aspiring writers on that website?
Well, hatrack.com was originally set up for fans of Orson Scott Card to talk about his books.
Right.
And so there is a Hat Rack forum, and they talk about all kinds of things. There is one part in that's for his publication, The Intergalactic Medicine Show, and they talk about the things that have been published in that. But the Hat Rack River Writers Forum is kind of separate.
But it's still on that homepage.
Yeah, you can find it from the hatrack.com page. Besides putting things up for feedback, there are also writing discussion. You can, instead of we have a 13-line limit because we don't want to use up electronic rights. And usually you can tell if somebody needs help, and some of the things that they need help on with that's the first page.
Right.
When you send a short story to an editor, it should only have 13 lines on it. The editor can tell the first 13 lines if they want to keep reading. And so your purpose is to be able to get people to keep reading.
Right.
But there's also discussion of writing, and you can put up your synopsis, no limit on how long that is. And people could give you suggestions on, well, okay, the way you're wrapping that up doesn't make sense, or why would they do that? You know, and so you can get feedback, and you can do brainstorming, and so it's just a great resource for writers.
Who moderates the?
I moderate it, and I try to make sure that people behave themselves, because it can be a lonely experience. Writing is lonely. And it's tough to be told that your gorgeous little baby here is ugly. But we know everyone has a beautiful image in their minds of what this story is. And what we're talking about is, and this is from Algis Budrus, who is an old-time science fiction writer.
He was the original coordinating judge.
He was the original judge for Writers of the Future. He said, when you're workshopping a story, it's not the beautiful child in your head, it's the words on the paper. And the purpose of a workshop is to help those words recreate this beautiful story in your head, in the reader's head. And those words are clumsy. They don't do what you want them to do. And so feedback helps you to get it closer to what it needs to be.
Wow, that's great. So, I mean, I just think, we have the Rise to the Future Forum, but this is great about your forum too, because it's, obviously Orson Scott Card is such a good friend, long-term friend, and you being a winner from Volume 9, and so many of the other people that have been influenced by Scott Card from, I mean, on his books on writing, it says make sure you enter the Writers
Yes.
of the Future contest. And a lot of our winners took that advice. And,
Well, and you know, we look to him.
yeah.
He is a real inspiration.
Yeah, he was one of the earlier podcasts of what we're listening to right now was Scott Card along with Tim Powers and Dave Wolverton. Right when they finished this year's Writers Workshop, they spent about 30 minutes just talking back and forth about what it was and what they tried to do.
Tim Powers is another great guy.
He is.
I remember being on a panel with him one time and Karen Joy Fowler, who I think
She was a winner.
Yeah, she was a winner of Writers of the Future, and I told, you know, somebody was saying, well, what about having you reading your stuff out loud? And I said, you know what will really do it? And this is something Marion Zimmer Bradley recommended. Have somebody else read it to you. And both Tim and Karen just groaned because that is really painful. But that tells you they don't know where the pauses are. They don't know where the emphasis is. They don't know why the words are all like this. And you see that. You hear it. You know.
That makes sense. It's painful, but nevertheless, that's what your public is reading and duplicating. And if that's not that beautiful child in your head.
So I don't know. I just really like to work with writers.
Yeah.
I think that they are creative, fun, interesting people, and they have wonderful ideas. And I like to see them get it and learn how to make their stories appear in the readers' heads.
Yeah.
So
that's one thing Scott Card, as well as pretty much every other job, says, be sure you get the books, read them, because that's how you see people, how you introduce a character in a short story. How do you start it off so you capture somebody's attention within the first, like you said, 13
Right, 13 lines. Dave told me one time that the way he picks the stories to send to the judges, and this is, there are lots of people sending in stories, and it takes him a while. But he looks to see how many mistakes, and after they've made a certain number of mistakes, they're not ready yet.
Right.
And the fewer mistakes you can make in your story, the better your chance is to go to the judges.
Yeah. But it makes sense, and especially now.
Yes.
35 years later, when there's so many entries from over 175 countries.
And there's so much competition out there.
Yeah.
There's so many things out there that people can choose from. If you self-publish, you don't have anybody that has vetted what you've done. And when you publish with someone that has an editor, then readers can be a little more confident that they're going to get something that somebody else likes.
Yeah.
And so you're running a risk if you won't accept editing. You hear about Stephen King, and Robert Heinlein was this way too. When they get so big that editors don't want to even touch their stuff, and they don't want it touched. And I can remember people saying, you know, it's just not as good as his earlier stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's not edited. So it really, editors know what they're doing, and they can tell you when something doesn't make sense. Now, something else Orson Scott Card said is when you have an editor working on it, and the editor says, try doing this and this and this, you don't have to do that. Especially if it doesn't fit what you're trying to do in your story. But he says what you need to do is go back in the story and figure out what made the editor want you to change it here. And sometimes you can go back and you can change it earlier, and it works a lot better, and it's more the way you want it.
Right.
So you don't have to do what anybody tells you to do in the feedback. But the feedback that can be exciting is the feedback that helps you see what you're trying to do and helps you do it better.
That's a very good point there. So with respect to aspiring writers, any particular advice you have to offer?
Well, one thing I would say is read. read a lot, and then if there's somebody whose writing you really like and you would really like to read or to write like them, pick your favorite story, and it works easier with a short story than it does with
Sure.
with a novel, and read it straight through 3 or 4 times. You will probably hate the story by the time you get through, but you will see everything that they did, and you will know what you can use
Wow.
in your story writing. An easier way that's not quite as painful is to type a story. You know, just type it right into your computer, because when you're typing it, you're seeing things that you won't see just reading it. You start reading something, if it's a great story, you just get into it and you don't
Yeah.
even know anybody's out there. You are just so, and so you don't see what they're doing.
Right.
But if you go over it several times or you type it, you're seeing it more clearly and you get a much better idea
Wow.
of how it works.
That's a very good tip.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. This is John Goodwin at the Salt Lake City FanX. Thank you again, Kathleen.
Thank you.